Marcus Chen had always been told he was unremarkable. Average height, average build, average test scores that barely got him into the Galactic Defense Academy. His instructors at the academy reminded him daily that humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Alliance, and, therefore, the least experienced in interstellar warfare. "Chen, you're slower than a Jaluvian slug," barked drill instructor Vexstar, a 7-foot-tall reptilian Draknari whose scales glowed red when he was particularly annoyed. Which seemed to be constantly when Marcus was around. "How do you expect to serve alongside species that have been fighting wars since before your planet even had fire?" Marcus gritted his teeth and continued his push-ups on the academy's training deck. Around him, other cadets from dozens of different species performed the same exercise with varying degrees of success. The Kytherian cadets, with their 4 muscular arms, knocked out push-ups like they were breathing. The crystalline Zelnari couldn't do push-ups at all, but they could interface directly with computer systems using their natural electrical fields. And then, there was Rex. Marcus first saw the creature during orientation week. It stood about 4 feet tall at the shoulder, covered in what looked like metallic fur that shifted between silver and deep blue depending on the light. It had 4 legs, a long snout filled with gleaming teeth, and eyes that seemed to hold an intelligence that made Marcus uncomfortable. Most unnervingly, it had a tail that never stopped moving, not the frantic wagging of an excited earth dog, but a slow, purposeful sweep that reminded Marcus of a predator measuring distances. "That's a Fenrian warhound," whispered Zara Okafor, another human cadet who had bunked next to Marcus. "I heard they're bred for combat. Born killers." The Fenrian noticed Marcus staring and approached with fluid, silent steps. Up close, Marcus could see that what he had taken for fur was actually thousands of tiny metallic fibers that seemed to respond to the creature's emotions. Right now, they lay flat against its body in what Marcus hoped was a neutral position. "You are the human called Marcus Chen," the creature said. Its voice was surprisingly melodic, though there was an undertone of barely contained growls. "I am designated Reaper 77 Alpha, though non-Fenrians may use the designation Rex for simplicity." Marcus blinked. "You're talking to me?" "I am assigned as your combat partner for the duration of academy training," Rex said, his tail giving what Marcus was beginning to recognize as a pleased swish. "The instructors believe pairing the weakest cadet with the most lethal will provide interesting data." "Weakest?" Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Rex tilted his head, studying Marcus with those unsettling eyes. According to Academy records, humans score lowest in physical capability, tactical awareness, and combat effectiveness among all Alliance species. You, specifically, rank in the bottom 10% of human cadets. The words stung because they were true. Marcus had always known he wasn't cut out for military life, but Earth's mandatory service requirement meant every human had to serve at least 2 years in the Galactic Defense Force. He'd hoped to get assigned to logistics or communications, something safe and boring where his mediocrity wouldn't get anyone killed. Instead, he'd been selected for combat training alongside literal killing machines. However, Rex continued, and something in his tone made Marcus look up. "Human military records from your species' internal conflicts show remarkable adaptability under pressure. I am curious to observe these traits firsthand." Over the following weeks, Marcus learned that Rex was unlike anything he'd imagined. The Fenrians were indeed bred for war, but they were also highly intelligent, capable of complex tactical thinking and technology interface. Rex could hack into computer systems with his claws, analyze chemical compositions by scent, and move so silently that even the Academy's advanced sensors sometimes lost track of him. What surprised Marcus most was Rex's personality. Despite being a killing machine, Rex was endlessly curious about human culture, asking questions about everything from human food preferences to social structures. He seemed particularly fascinated by the concept of pets. "So humans keep inferior versions of other species in their homes for emotional comfort?" Rex asked one evening as they studied tactical manuals in their shared quarters. "Dogs aren't inferior," Marcus protested. "They're loyal companions. They love unconditionally." Rex's metallic fur rippled in what Marcus had learned was amusement. "And yet they serve no tactical purpose in human conflicts." "Not everything has to be about fighting," Marcus said. "Sometimes companionship is enough." Rex's tail swished thoughtfully. Interesting. Fenrians are raised in pack units for optimal combat efficiency. Emotional attachments are considered tactical weaknesses. That sounds lonely, Marcus said without thinking. Rex went very still. His fur flattened against his body in a pattern Marcus didn't recognize. Loneliness is not a concept familiar to my species, he said carefully. But something in his voice suggested otherwise. Their first major test came during the third week of training. The exercise was simple in concept: navigate through a hostile environment simulation, neutralize enemy targets, and extract valuable intelligence. The catch was that it would test every cadet's weakest attributes. For most species, this meant scenarios designed to exploit their natural limitations. For humans, it meant everything. Chen, you and your pet will be dropped into Scenario 7, Instructor Vextar announced with what Marcus was sure was sadistic glee. Urban combat environment, multiple hostiles, civilians present. Try not to embarrass your entire species. Rex's fur bristled at being called a pet, but he said nothing. As they suited up in their combat gear, he moved close to Marcus. The instructor seeks to humiliate you, Rex said quietly. Scenario 7 has a 12% success rate among Academy cadets. Great, Marcus muttered, checking his weapon for the third time. The standard GDF plasma rifle felt awkward in his hands, despite weeks of training. Any advice? Do not attempt to match other species at their strengths, Rex said. Humans excel in areas that are difficult to quantify. Improvisation. Lateral thinking. The ability to find solutions that others overlook. Easy for you to say. You were literally designed for this. Rex's head tilted. Perhaps. But you were not designed for this, and yet you are here. That suggests capabilities that mere design cannot account for. The simulation began in what appeared to be a devastated city street. Buildings showed blast damage, vehicles were overturned, and the air was thick with artificial smoke. Somewhere in this maze, enemy soldiers held hostages and critical data that needed to be retrieved. Other cadet teams had already entered the simulation. Marcus could hear weapon fire and shouted commands in various alien languages echoing through the streets. The Draknari team was probably smashing through walls with their natural armor. The Kytherian squad would be using their forearms to coordinate complex multi-angle attacks. Marcus crouched behind a burned-out vehicle, feeling completely out of his depth. 6 hostiles approaching from the northeast, Rex reported, his enhanced senses picking up threats that Marcus's human eyes missed entirely. Standard formation suggests hegemony shock troops. The hegemony were the Alliance's primary enemy, a coalition of aggressive species that sought to conquer rather than cooperate. Marcus had studied their tactics but never faced them, even in simulation. How do we handle 6 trained soldiers? Marcus whispered. We do not handle them, Rex said, his tail swishing in what Marcus now recognized as anticipation. We eliminate them. Rex moved like liquid death. One moment he was beside Marcus, the next he was among the enemy soldiers, his claws and teeth finding vital points with surgical precision. But even Rex couldn't handle 6 opponents simultaneously. Marcus watched his partner, and the word partner surprised him with its emotional weight, begin to take hits from enemy weapons. Rex's metallic fur was designed to disperse energy weapons to some degree, but he wasn't invulnerable. That's when Marcus did something that none of his instructors had taught him. He started running toward the fight while simultaneously stripping off his armor. Chen, what are you doing? Rex snarled between combat moves. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't explain the plan because he wasn't sure it would work. He just knew that conventional tactics weren't going to cut it, and sometimes the best solution was the one nobody expected. He reached the combat zone just as Rex took a solid hit from a plasma rifle. The Fenrian stumbled, and 2 enemy soldiers moved in for the kill. Marcus threw his armor at them. Not in any tactical way that would make sense to military strategists. He literally hurled pieces of combat armor like a deranged human throwing rocks, while screaming at the top of his lungs in what he hoped sounded like a berserker rage but was actually just pure terror. The enemy soldiers, trained for combat against rational opponents, hesitated for just a moment. Who throws away their armor in the middle of a firefight? What kind of tactical madness was this? That moment of confusion was all Rex needed. The Fenrians' recovery was instantaneous and devastating. While the enemies were trying to process the illogical human behavior, Rex eliminated 3 of them in as many seconds. Marcus, meanwhile, had somehow acquired one of the fallen soldiers' weapons and was firing wildly in the general direction of the remaining threats. His accuracy was terrible, but it didn't matter. The combination of Rex's lethal precision and Marcus's unpredictable chaos had completely disrupted the enemy's formation and decision-making process. When the smoke cleared, all 6 enemy soldiers were down, the hostages were safe, and Marcus was sitting on the ground wondering what the hell had just happened. "Interesting," Rex said, examining a minor wound on his flank. "I have never seen armor used as a psychological warfare tool." "I panicked," Marcus admitted. "I thought you were going to die and I just reacted." Rex's fur shifted to a pattern Marcus hadn't seen before, warmer somehow, with hints of gold threading through the silver and blue. "You risked your own safety to assist me." "Well, yeah. We're partners." "Partners," Rex repeated the word slowly, as if testing its flavor. "This is not a Fenrian concept. Maybe that's something worth learning." They completed the rest of the simulation without major incident, though Marcus noticed that Rex's fighting style had changed slightly. Where before the Fenrian had operated with cold, calculated efficiency, now he seemed to be actively coordinating with Marcus, creating opportunities for the human to contribute rather than simply handling threats alone. When they emerged from the simulation, Instructor Vextar was waiting with a datapad that displayed their performance metrics. "Interesting results," the Draknari said, his scales shifting to a more neutral green color. "Your tactical scores are still abysmal, Shen. But your adaptation rating and partner coordination scores are." He paused, checking the display again. "Well above average." "Above average?" Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. "It seems that while humans are individually unremarkable, you demonstrate unusual effectiveness when working in partnership with other species. Particularly when those partners have complementary capabilities." Rex's tail gave what Marcus was learning to recognize as a pleased swish. That night, as they reviewed their performance and prepared for the next day's training, Rex asked an unexpected question. "Marcus, what is it like to have a family?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" "Humans form emotional bonds with their offspring and care for them even when they are no longer useful for survival. This seems inefficient, yet human societies are remarkably stable." "I am curious about the mechanism." Marcus thought about his parents back on Earth, his father who had taught him to fix old combustion engines even though electric vehicles had been standard for decades, his mother who still sent him care packages despite the fact that everything she included was available at the academy. "It's not about usefulness," Marcus said finally. "Family is, it's people who care about you not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. They support you when you're weak, celebrate when you succeed, and stick with you even when you make mistakes." Rex was quiet for a long moment. Fenrians are removed from their birth packs at maturity and assigned to new units based on tactical requirements. "We do not maintain emotional connections to previous associates." "That does sound lonely," Marcus said again. This time, Rex didn't contradict him. "Perhaps," the Fenrian said quietly, "there are things more valuable than tactical efficiency." Marcus looked at his partner, really looked at him. Rex was undeniably a weapon, bred and trained for warfare with capabilities that Marcus couldn't hope to match. But he was also intelligent, curious, and, increasingly, a friend. "Maybe we can teach each other," Marcus suggested. Rex's fur shifted to that warm gold-threaded pattern again, and his tail gave a slow, thoughtful wag. "I would find that acceptable," Rex said, and, for the first time since arriving at the academy, Marcus felt like he might actually belong somewhere. The weeks that followed changed everything for Marcus and Rex. Word of their unconventional success in Scenario 7 had spread throughout the academy, though not always in ways that made Marcus comfortable. Some instructors began treating their partnership as an interesting experiment, while others seemed determined to prove that the success had been a fluke. Commander Thales, a towering Vorthak with crystalline skin that reflected light in prismatic patterns, called them to her office on a gray morning that promised harder training ahead. Cadet Chen, Warrior Rex, she began, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones that made all Vorthak speech sound like music. Your performance metrics have drawn attention from the Academy board. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Attention from the board usually meant trouble for cadets who didn't fit standard parameters. However, Commander Thales continued, it appears that your partnership has achieved something we have been attempting to cultivate for decades, true interspecies tactical integration. Rex's ears perked forward with interest. Clarification requested, Commander. Most mixed species units operate with species fulfilling their traditional roles. Draknari provide heavy assault, Kytherians handle technical operations, Zelnari manage communications and data analysis. Each species does what they evolved or were bred to do best. That makes sense, Marcus said, though he sensed there was more to this explanation. Efficient, yes. But predictable, Commander Thales said. Enemy forces can anticipate our tactics because they know our species' capabilities. What you two demonstrated was something different, tactical unpredictability through genuine cooperation rather than role specialization. Marcus exchanged glances with Rex. The Fenrian's tail was doing that slow, thoughtful swish that Marcus had learned meant Rex was processing complex information. You are being reassigned, Commander Thales announced. There is a special unit being formed, an experimental mixed-species team designed to test new cooperative tactics. You will be among the first members. What kind of unit? Marcus asked. The kind that gets sent where traditional tactics have failed, the commander replied. Your first assignment is to investigate a missing research station in the Kepler sector. 3 previous teams have been lost attempting this mission. Rex's first shifted to a pattern Marcus had learned indicated heightened alertness. Specifications on previous teams? Aldraknari Assault Team, lost without transmission. Combined Kytherian Zelnari Technical Team, lost after reporting anomalous readings. Mixed Traditional Unit with 1 member from each major alliance species, lost after reporting successful station approach. Marcus felt a familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. What makes the Academy think we'll succeed where 3 other teams failed? Because, Commander Thales said, her prismatic skin shifting to warmer hues, previous teams approached this as a traditional military problem. Perhaps it requires a less traditional solution. 2 days later, Marcus found himself aboard the exploration vessel Harmony's Edge alongside the other members of their newly formed unit. The ship was smaller than the Academy training vessels, built for stealth and rapid response rather than overwhelming firepower. The team was unlike anything Marcus had encountered in standard military training. Besides himself and Rex, there was Zix, a young Jaluvian whose slug-like appearance hid a brilliant analytical mind and the ability to secrete various useful chemicals from specialized glands. Kira was a hegemony defector, a rare Esikatar whose spider-like appearance and ability to move through zero gravity in 3 dimensions had made her invaluable to Alliance intelligence. Their commanding officer was perhaps the strangest choice of all, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, another human who had apparently made a name for herself in unconventional operations. I know what you're thinking, Sarah said as she briefed the team during their approach to the Kepler sector. Why put 2 humans on a 5-person team? Humans are supposed to be the weakest link, right? Marcus nodded, because that was exactly what he'd been thinking. Turns out, Sarah continued with a grin that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of his drill instructors, humans have some interesting capabilities that other species tend to overlook. We're not the strongest, fastest, or smartest. But, we're adaptable in ways that can surprise everyone, including ourselves. Previous mission parameters suggest traditional approaches are inadequate, Rex observed. What alternative strategies are you proposing? That's the thing, Sarah said. We're not going in with a predetermined strategy. We're going to assess the situation and improvise based on what we find. Kira's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was amusement among her species. Improvisation is not typically considered a military virtue. Maybe that's why traditional military approaches failed, Zix suggested, his translation device rendering his chemical communications into standard alliance speech. Perhaps this situation requires non-military thinking. The research station Epsilon 7 hung in space like a metal corpse, its lights darkened, communication arrays silent. As their ship approached, Marcus could see that the station appeared physically intact, no blast damage, no signs of combat or structural failure. All systems show normal from external scans, Kira reported from the sensor station, her multiple arms working across various control interfaces simultaneously. Life support functional, power systems active, docking bays operational. Then, where is everyone? Marcus muttered. That, Sarah said grimly, is exactly what we're here to find out. The docking process went smoothly, which somehow made Marcus more nervous rather than less. He'd been in enough training scenarios to know that when things seemed too easy, it usually meant you were walking into a trap. The station's corridors were lit and properly pressurized, but eerily quiet. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the empty halls, and Marcus noticed that Rex's fur had shifted to a pattern he didn't recognize, deep blues and purples that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Rex, you okay?" Marcus whispered. "Environmental analysis indicates no immediate threats," Rex replied quietly. "However, scent patterns are unusual." "Unusual how?" "Multiple species were present recently. Alliance personnel, as expected. But also scents that do not match any known alliance or hegemony species." Zix, who had been analyzing chemical traces with his specialized senses, suddenly stopped moving entirely. For a Jaluvian, complete stillness was the equivalent of a human freezing in terror. "Zix?" Sarah called softly. "Commander," Zix said slowly, "I am detecting traces of pheromone patterns that suggest extreme fear from multiple species. But, the concentrations are wrong." "Wrong how?" "Too uniform. As if the fear was artificial. Synthesized." Kira's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation among her species. "That is not a capability possessed by any known technology." They reached the station's main research lab without incident, but what they found there defied explanation. Equipment was arranged normally, experiments appeared to have been running properly, and personal belongings were scattered around as if the researchers had simply vanished in the middle of their daily routines. But there were other things too. Scratch marks on the walls that didn't match any known tool or weapon. Geometric patterns carved into metal surfaces with impossible precision. And, in the center of the lab, a device that none of them recognized. "Well, that's new," Sarah said, approaching the device cautiously. It was roughly spherical, about the size of a basketball, with a surface that seemed to shift between metallic and organic textures. Conduits connected it to the station's main power grid, and displays around the lab showed readings that meant nothing to any of them. "Rex, any thoughts?" Marcus asked. The Fenrian was examining the scratch marks on the walls, his enhanced senses working overtime. These marks were made by claws or talons, but the spacing and pattern do not match any known species in alliance or hegemony databases. "Unknown species?" Sarah frowned. "That would be a first contact situation. Why weren't we briefed on that possibility?" "Perhaps," Kira suggested, "because those who sent us did not know." Marcus studied the strange device, feeling an odd sense of familiarity that he couldn't explain. Something about its proportions, the way it seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. "Guys," he said slowly, "I think I know what this is." "Enlighten us," Sarah said. "It's a puzzle." The team stared at him. "Explain," Rex said, his tail giving an interested twitch. Marcus circled the device, noting how certain sections seemed designed to move or rotate. "Look at the construction. Those aren't random patterns, they're interlocking pieces. And the power readings suggest it's not running at full capacity." "You think it's incomplete?" Sarah asked. "I think it's waiting for someone to solve it." Zix slithered closer to the device, his chemical senses working intensively. "Marcus may be correct. The energy patterns suggest a system in standby mode, awaiting specific input." "Input like what?" Kira asked. Marcus thought about their training, about all the scenarios where conventional approaches had failed. About how sometimes the solution wasn't to fight or analyze or outthink a problem, but to simply try something unexpected. What if, he said slowly, the previous teams failed because they approached this like a military threat or a research problem? What if it's neither? What are you suggesting? Sarah asked. Marcus approached the device, ignoring the concerned sounds from his teammates. Up close, he could see that the shifting patterns on its surface weren't random, they responded to proximity, to movement, almost as if the device was studying him as much as he was studying it. I'm suggesting that maybe this is a test. He reached out and touched the device. The world exploded into sensation. Not painful, but overwhelming, like having every sense activated simultaneously at maximum intensity. Marcus was dimly aware of his teammates shouting his name, but their voices seemed to come from very far away. Instead, he found himself in a place that wasn't a place, facing something that wasn't quite a being. Interesting, the not being said without speaking. You approach without fear or aggression. Most unusual for a military species. I'm not really much of a soldier, Marcus managed to say, though he wasn't sure if he was actually speaking. No, the entity agreed, you are not. You are something else. Something curious. Marcus became aware that he was being studied with an intensity that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. But there was no malice in the examination, only genuine interest. Your species is new to our awareness, the entity continued. The others who came before approached our test as conquerors or scientists. They sought to understand us in order to use or control us. But, you simply wish to understand. Are you what happened to the research teams? In a manner of speaking. We relocated them to a safe environment while we determined their intentions. They were aggressive in their curiosity. We found this concerning. Marcus thought about the Alliance military doctrine he'd been studying, about how first contact protocols always emphasized establishing superior position and technological assessment. They were probably just trying to follow standard procedures. Perhaps. But procedures based on assumptions of threat and competition. Your approach suggests different assumptions. Like what? Like the possibility that new contact might result in friendship rather than conflict. The sensation of being examined intensified, but Marcus found himself relaxing into it rather than fighting. It reminded him of Rex's careful study of human behavior, driven by curiosity rather than judgment. You work in partnership with a created warrior, the entity observed. Yet neither of you seeks to dominate the relationship. Why would we? We're stronger together than apart. Indeed. This is a concept your species understands that many others do not. The not place around Marcus began to shift, showing him images of the missing research teams. They were alive and, apparently unharmed, living in what looked like comfortable facilities while being observed by entities that Marcus's mind couldn't quite process directly. Will you release them? Marcus asked. That depends, the entity replied. Can you convince your leaders that we represent opportunity rather than threat? That some problems are best solved through cooperation rather than conquest? Marcus thought about his own journey from failed cadet to trusted partner, about how Rex had grown from viewing him as an assignment to considering him family, about how their mixed species team was learning to succeed precisely because they didn't follow traditional approaches. I can try, he said. But I'll need help. My teammates and we're not really authorities on anything. We're just the ones they send when normal solutions don't work. The entity's amusement was palpable. Perhaps that is precisely why you are the right authorities for this situation. The overwhelming sensation began to fade, and Marcus found himself back in the research lab, his hand still touching the device. His teammates were clustered around him with expressions of concern and confusion. Marcus, Sarah was saying. You've been standing there for 3 hours. We couldn't get any response from you. 3 hours? It had felt like minutes. I'm okay, Marcus said, though his legs felt unsteady. More than okay, actually. I think I know what happened to the missing teams. Rex moved to support him as Marcus swayed slightly. Explanation requested. They're safe, Marcus said. But, we have a bigger situation here than anyone realized. This isn't just a missing persons case, it's a potential first contact scenario with a species that could either become humanity's greatest ally or humanity's most dangerous enemy. What determines which? Kira asked. Marcus looked around at his teammates, the diverse group of beings who had learned to work together not in spite of their differences, but because of them. How well we can prove that cooperation is possible, he said. Rex's tail gave what Marcus now recognized as a hopeful wag, and, for the first time since joining the military, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The return journey to Alliance Command took 3 days, during which Marcus found himself repeatedly questioned about his experience with the alien device. Each retelling felt inadequate. How do you explain a conversation that happened without words, with a being that existed outside normal perception? Rex had become increasingly protective during the journey, positioning himself between Marcus and the other team members whenever the questioning became too intense. It was a behavior that Marcus found both touching and slightly embarrassing. You don't need to guard me from our own teammates, Marcus told Rex during one of their private moments in the ship's observation deck. The entity's contact with you has changed something, Rex replied, his metallic fur shifting through patterns that Marcus was still learning to read. Your scent, your body language, even the electrical patterns of your nervous system are subtly different. Marcus considered this. He did feel different, not in any way that seemed threatening, but as if some new sense had been awakened. Sometimes he caught himself understanding things about his teammates that went beyond normal observation, as if he could sense their emotional states directly. Is that bad? Marcus asked. Rex's tail gave a thoughtful swish. Unknown. But, it suggests that this first contact has implications beyond simple diplomatic exchange. Alliance Command Headquarters was exactly as intimidating as Marcus had expected, a massive station at the heart of Alliance space, bristling with defensive systems and home to representatives from every member species. As their shuttle approached the docking bay, Marcus could see the varied architecture that reflected the diverse needs of hundreds of different forms of life. They were escorted immediately to a briefing room where a council of senior officers waited. Marcus recognized some species from his academy training, but others were completely unfamiliar. Alliance membership was vast and constantly growing. Admiral Corax, a massive Draknari whose scales had faded to the silver gray of advanced age, led the inquiry. His presence was commanding in a way that made Marcus instinctively want to stand straighter. Cadet Chen, the Admiral began, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command, your report suggests we have made contact with a previously unknown spacefaring species. This would be the first such contact in over 50 years. Yes, sir, Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. And, this species has been observing Alliance activities without our knowledge, possessing technology that can render our people unconscious and transport them without detection. Not unconscious, sir, Marcus corrected carefully. Relocated for observation. The missing teams are alive and unharmed. So you claim, interjected General Valtih, a Kytherian whose 4 arms gestured dismissively. But, we have only your word for this. For all we know, you've been compromised by some form of mental conditioning. Marcus felt Rex tense beside him, ready to defend his partner against any threat. The gesture warmed Marcus even as he realized it might be counterproductive in this setting. With respect, General, Lieutenant Commander Martinez spoke up, Cadet Chen's behavior and responses have been consistent with his established personality patterns. If he's been compromised, it's been done with remarkable subtlety. Subtlety that could itself be a weapon, Valtih responded. The debate continued for hours, with various officials arguing about threat assessments, containment protocols, and military responses. Marcus found himself growing increasingly frustrated as the discussion moved further away from what he had actually experienced. Finally, he stood up. The room fell silent. In military protocol, junior officers did not interrupt councils of senior leadership. Marcus was probably about to end his career, but he was tired of being talked about rather than to. Sir, he addressed Admiral Corax directly, with your permission, I'd like to demonstrate something. The Admiral's scaled brow ridge rose in what might have been amusement. "Proceed, Cadet." Marcus looked around the room at the assembled officers, dozens of different species, each with their own evolutionary history, their own strengths and limitations, their own perspectives on the universe. "Everyone here is focused on the potential threat these beings represent," Marcus said. "What if that's exactly the wrong approach?" "Explain," Admiral Corex commanded. "Every species in the Alliance joined because cooperation offered advantages that couldn't be achieved alone," Marcus continued. "The Draknari brought military strength, the Kytherians brought technical expertise, the Zelnari brought communication and data processing capabilities. Each species contributed what they did best." "Your point?" General Valtiach asked impatiently. "My point is that humans are supposedly the worst at everything. We're not the strongest, smartest, fastest, or most advanced. But, somehow, we keep finding ways to make situations work that shouldn't work." Marcus gestured to Rex, who had been listening intently. "My partner here is a designed killing machine. By every logical measure, he should see me as a liability. Instead, we become effective precisely because we don't approach problems the way either of our species typically would." Rex's fur shifted to that warm, gold-threaded pattern that Marcus associated with pride. "Marcus demonstrates capabilities that pure breeding cannot produce," the Fenrian said. "Adaptation, innovation, and the ability to find unconventional solutions to complex problems. And you believe these capabilities are relevant to our current situation?" Admiral Corex asked. "I believe," Marcus said, feeling more confident as he spoke, "that these beings are testing us. Not our military strength or our technology, but our capacity for genuine cooperation. They've dealt with 3 teams that approached them as either threats to be neutralized or resources to be exploited. What if they're waiting for someone to approach them as potential partners?" The room erupted in discussion, with various officers expressing opinions ranging from cautious optimism to outright skepticism. Marcus noticed that the debate seemed to split along species lines. Those from naturally cooperative species seemed more open to his suggestion, while those from more hierarchical or competitive backgrounds remained suspicious. It was Commander Thales who finally restored order, her crystalline skin reflecting the room's lights and patterns that commanded attention. "Perhaps," she suggested, "we should allow the beings in question to speak for themselves." "How do you propose we do that?" Admiral Corex asked. "Cadet Chen established contact once," Thales replied. "Perhaps he can do so again." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I understand how the contact worked." "It might have been a one-time thing." Or, Rex suggested quietly, it might be that these beings are waiting for the right kind of invitation. Over the next several hours, Alliance Command's top technicians worked to establish a communication link with the research station. The strange device that Marcus had touched remained active, its energy pattern suggesting that it was indeed waiting for something. As the communication array powered up, Marcus found himself back in the observation area where he'd first made contact, but this time surrounded by Alliance leadership and recording equipment. The pressure was enormous. If this went wrong, it could mean war with an unknown and, potentially superior enemy. If it went right, well, Marcus wasn't sure what right would look like in this situation. The device activated, and, once again Marcus found himself experiencing that overwhelming sensation of expanded awareness. But, this time, the entity's presence felt different, more cautious, but also more hopeful. "You have returned," it observed. "And you have brought others." "They want to talk," Marcus said, aware that his words were being broadcast to the command center. "They're scared, but they're willing to listen." "Fear is natural when encountering the unknown," the entity replied. "We ourselves experienced fear when we first detected your alliance's expansion into our territory." "Territory?" Marcus asked, sensing the sharp attention of the military leadership. "Not in the sense of claimed space," the entity clarified. "But regions of space where our kind exist in forms that your species might not recognize as life. We have been observing your various species for many of your generations, studying your development, trying to understand your intentions." Marcus relayed this information, hearing the buzz of discussion from the command center. The implications were staggering. This species had been watching the Alliance's development for potentially centuries without making their presence known. "What made you reveal yourselves now?" Marcus asked. "Your species," the entity replied. "Humans demonstrate something we had not observed before, the ability to form genuine partnerships across biological barriers. Most species cooperate for mutual advantage, but humans appear capable of forming emotional bonds that transcend utility." Marcus thought about Rex, about how their relationship had evolved from assignment to partnership to something approaching brotherhood. "You're talking about friendship?" "Yes. Friendship. A concept that our kind values highly, but which we had not believed possible between species as different as yours appear to be." The entity paused, and Marcus sensed it was communicating with others of its kind. "We propose a test." "What kind of test?" "Send your team back to us. Not as investigators or soldiers, but as guests. Let us learn from each other in an environment of mutual trust. If this succeeds, we will return your missing researchers and begin formal diplomatic contact. And if it fails? Then, we will withdraw from your territory and you will never encounter us again. But the opportunity for alliance between our peoples will be lost." Marcus relayed the proposal to the command center, then waited as urgent discussions took place among the Alliance leadership. The debate was intense. Trusting an unknown species with a team of their personnel was an enormous risk. Finally, Admiral Corex's voice came through the communication system. "Cadet Chen, ask them why they believe this test is necessary." Marcus posed the question and received an immediate response. "Because," the entity said, "alliance requires trust, and trust cannot be built through fear. Your people approached us with weapons and defensive measures because that is how they approach all unknown situations. We understand this instinct, but it makes genuine cooperation impossible. They're asking us to approach them without military backup," Marcus explained to the command center. "As equals rather than potential enemies." The discussion that followed was the longest yet. Marcus could hear heated debate about precedent, protocol, and acceptable risk levels. Species representatives argued about whether any unknown contact was worth such a gamble. It was Rex who finally spoke up, his voice carrying clearly through the communication link. "Admiral Corex," the Fenrian said formally, "request permission to volunteer for this mission." The command center fell silent. "Warrior Rex," Admiral Corex replied slowly, "you are a valuable military asset. Risking you on an unproven diplomatic mission would be exactly what these beings are looking for," Rex interrupted, which was virtually unprecedented behavior for a Fenrian addressing superior rank. "They seek evidence that cooperation is possible." "What better evidence than a designed weapon choosing trust over suspicion?" Marcus felt a surge of pride and affection for his partner that was so strong it was almost overwhelming. Rex was putting everything on the line based on nothing more than faith in their partnership. "Rex," Marcus said quietly, "you don't have to do this." "Yes," Rex replied, his tail giving that slow, determined swish that Marcus had learned to associate with absolute conviction, "I do. Because if these beings represent a chance for genuine alliance, for friendship between species, then that is worth any risk." One by one, the other members of their team volunteered as well. Sarah Martinez stepped forward with the grin that usually meant she was about to do something inadvisable. Zix's chemical communications indicated acceptance despite considerable apprehension. Kira's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was her species' equivalent of a resigned sigh. "We're a team," Sarah said simply. "Teams stick together." Admiral Corex was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a gravity that suggested this decision would be remembered for generations. "Very well," he said. "You have permission to proceed with this diplomatic contact. But, understand, you will be representing not just humanity or the Alliance, but the potential for peaceful coexistence between species that evolution never intended to meet." As preparations began for their return to the research station, Marcus found himself alone with Rex in their temporary quarters. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked. "These beings are completely unknown. Their capabilities are far beyond anything we understand. This could be the worst mistake in Alliance history. Rex's fur shifted to that warm, gold-threaded pattern that Marcus had come to love. "Marcus," the Fenrian said quietly, "do you remember what you told me about family? About people who care about you not because of what you can do, but because of who you are?" Marcus nodded. "I believe that is what these beings are offering. Not alliance based on utility, but friendship based on understanding. For my species, this would be unprecedented. For most species," Marcus pointed out. "Yes. Which is why it must be humans who lead this effort. Because humans, alone among all the species I have studied, seem capable of loving things that provide no tactical advantage." Rex's tail gave a gentle wag, and Marcus understood that his partner was talking about more than just diplomatic theory. As their shuttle departed Alliance Command for what might be the most important diplomatic mission in galactic history, Marcus reflected on how far he'd come from being the worst cadet in his academy class. He still wasn't the strongest, fastest, or smartest member of his team. But maybe, just maybe, he was exactly what the galaxy needed. Rex settled beside him as they entered hyperspace, and Marcus couldn't help but smile at the sight of a killing machine that chose trust over suspicion, partnership over dominance, and friendship over fear. Whatever waited for them at the research station, they would face it together. And, sometimes, Marcus was learning, that was enough.